The President of the United States is considered the most powerful individual in the world. The principal source of this power is the Constitution's Article 2. Article 2 defines term of office, the selection, the qualifications, the oath, powers of appointment, responsibilities, and provisions for impeachment. This is done in about 1,000 words. The office was defined in such simple terms because of George Washington, the father of the country. He was commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. The army he led defeated Great Britain in the War for Independence. At the end of the war in 1783, at a time when great generals often were crowned kings, Washington left public life, showing the world that there would be no royalty in the new America. George Washington presided over the 1787 Constitutional Convention, and his signature is the first on the Constitution. When the office of president was created, everyone expected Washington to be the first. The office was defined in such simple terms because of trust in Washington. In 1789, he was elected the new Constitution's first president. For 8 years, Washington set hundreds of precedents on presidential conduct. He adopted the non-royal title, Mr. President. In 1797, he set a precedent that would last over 140 years by retiring after 2 terms. Washington, by example, demonstrated that the American Republic would have no royalty and that government worked best when citizens served and returned to private life. When he resumed private life and relinquished power, Washington proved worthy of the trust placed in him. Though Article 2 is the principal source of presidential power, detailed presidential interactions with Congress are found in Article 1, which is devoted to Congress. Article 1, Section 7 defines the president's power to approve or veto laws passed by Congress. Article 2, devoted to the presidency, starts with the vesting clause. The executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. Those 15 words created what has become the most powerful office in world history. Article 2, Section 1 defines the 4-year term of office, election process, qualifications for office, succession, oath of office, and impeachment. Article 2, Section 1 created the Electoral College, a term not found in the Constitution. In the early 1800s, Electoral College came into use as the unofficial designation for citizens selected by states to cast votes for president and vice president. The Electoral College was first written into federal law in 1845. Title III, United States Code, Section 4, twice includes the term College of Electors. Electoral College members, called electors, cast the actual votes for president and vice president. Each state's electors equal the number of its senators and House members. The 23rd Amendment gave the District of Columbia 3 electors. There are currently 538 electors, and a candidate requires 270 votes for election as president. In the first presidential election of 1788, in most states, the general population had little say in selecting electors. State legislatures chose electors, who then cast the presidential votes. The Constitution empowers state legislatures to choose the method of selecting electors. By 1832, all states, except South Carolina, provided for electors pledged to vote for the winner of the state's popular vote. The Constitution does not require electors to honor that pledge. Once chosen, the Constitution allows an elector to cast a ballot for anyone. Since 1788, 156 pledged electors have cast votes for someone else. Such electors are known as Faithless electors. Though the Constitution does not, states may impose voting requirements on its electors. In 38 states and the District of Columbia, electors are bound by law to vote for their party's nominee, while 12 states have no such law. In 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously upheld state laws that punish or replace faithless electors. Originally, the person with the second highest electoral vote became vice president. This created problems. In 1796, rivals John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were elected president and vice president. Likewise, in 1800, Jefferson and political adversary Aaron Burr were elected. To address this issue, in 1804, the 12th Amendment mandated a separate vote for vice president. Another constitutional oversight did not define what happened if a president-elect died before taking office. The 20th Amendment addressed this by providing that the vice president-elect became president under that circumstance. Once all states finally chose electors by popular vote, it became possible for a candidate to win the people's vote, yet lose in the Electoral College. This happened in 1876, 1888, 2000, and 2016. There are only 3 presidential constitutional qualifications. An individual must be a natural-born citizen of the United States, 35 years of age, and 14 years a resident of the United States. The Constitution provided that the Vice President acquired presidential powers in the case of a president's death, removal, or disability. No provision existed to fill a vice presidential vacancy. Following President Kennedy's assassination in 1963, in the age of nuclear weapons, it became evident that clear presidential succession by a person aligned with the sitting president was critical. In 1967, the 25th Amendment empowered a president to fill a vice presidential vacancy with approval by a majority of both houses of Congress. This amendment also established a process to deal with presidential disabilities. The president assumes office with this solemn oath. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution provides for other federal and state office holders to take an oath of office to support the Constitution. However, the President is the only official whose oath requires specific words. Article 2, Section 2, delineates presidential authority and confers the title of Military Commander-in-Chief. Since the President commands the world's most powerful military, he has become known as the world's most powerful leader. Article 2, Section 2 sets forth executive authority. The President, with the consent of the Senate, appoints ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States. These officials serve at the pleasure of the President, except judges appointed pursuant to Article 3, who have lifetime appointments. The President represents the United States to other nations. This is not ceremonial, since the Constitution empowers the President to negotiate treaties. Before a treaty becomes effective, it must be ratified by the Senate. The President has power, literally, of life, death, and freedom. This is the pardon power. The President can call off an execution or free someone from prison with the stroke of a pen. The President's annual address to a joint session of Congress regarding the State of the Union is a constitutional obligation. Article 2, Section 3 requires, he shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the State of the Union. While the President is granted great authority, ultimately the Constitution's command is simple. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Beyond specific constitutional powers, Congress has delegated other authority to the President. Donald Trump's tariff policies demonstrate such delegations. Here are examples of delegated authority relied upon by President Trump. The Trade Act of 1974 grants the President broad authority to take action, including imposing tariffs, in response to unfair trade practices. Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 allows the President to retaliate against unfair or discriminatory trade practices by imposing tariffs. Article 2, Section 4 provides for presidential impeachment as follows. The President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. While legal scholars debate the meaning of high crime or misdemeanor, Gerald Ford noted that as a practical matter, those offenses are any conduct agreed upon by a majority of the House and 2/3 of the Senate. The impeachments of Bill Clinton and Donald Trump demonstrate the reality of President Ford's observation. While the Constitution broadly vests executive power in the President, it also commands that the laws be faithfully executed. No constitutional authority exists to exempt individuals from a law, except perhaps the pardon power. The President's authority is not unlimited. Actions outside authority granted by the Constitution or delegated by Congress are subject to challenge. The ultimate arbiter of the limits of presidential power is the Supreme Court. President Andrew Jackson famously took issue with this limit by declaring about a Supreme Court decision, "Chief Justice Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it." Presidents frustrated with Congress often threaten to exercise executive power if Congress fails to further a president's agenda. This friction between the branches is expected in a system with checks and balances, and separation of powers. Barack Obama famously announced his intent to use his pen and phone to bypass Congress.
Richard Nixon simply said, "Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal."
Joe Biden repeatedly attempted to forgive student loans when Congress would not do it, and the Supreme Court said he lacked the power. Donald Trump's second-term flurry of executive orders are winding their way through the courts. The role of the president is powerful yet finite. Established by constitutional design and precedent, it underscores that no individual holds absolute power. The president is not an omnipotent king, thanks to the work of the founders and George Washington, who lived up to the trust placed in him to set the example for conduct and tone of the presidential office. To learn more about the Constitution, like this video and subscribe to this channel.